really happy to have a reason not to be in my environment today. It's nice to have a break from that kind of thinking and do something a little bit different, so I'm really happy to be here. We're going to start out with an activity that we do every year with our students. And it's kind of a fun activity. It's a little bit different from what you might think you might be doing with your show and tell today. When we tell kids that they are to bring a show and tell, they always assume that they're going to be up in front having to share the way they did when they were in elementary school. We're still in elementary school, but we don't share like that. And so we ask them to bring something that means something to them. And it can be anything. We asked you to do the same. And so hopefully you brought something. If you didn't, we're going to have you just mime it out. So you'll get to do some charades this morning. But here's the rules. For 30 seconds, and you need a timer in your group because we'll hold to that kind of time. So timer in your group. For 30 seconds, you get to talk about the item that you brought. After 30 seconds, you aren't allowed to say anything else about the item, but everybody else for 2 minutes gets to talk about that item. So it can be something that they relate to it. It can be something it reminds them of. It can be a story that it triggered from your childhood. It can be a question that you have. The hard part is the person who brought it can't say anything in response. So you purely just sit back and listen to what everybody else has to say about the thing that you brought. So this is the thing I brought. And this is a wooden model rocket. When I was a kid, my family would spend summers in Black Rock Desert or the Salt Flats. And we would go and meet up with a bunch of other rocket nerds. And we would fly these. And my dad is an entrepreneur. He actually started a company when I was a kid called Retro Rocket Works. And so he made kits of these wooden rockets that we would sell. I would sew the canvas bags that they went in, and he would sell those. And then we'd go fly them in the summer at Black Rock Desert. And so lots of happy memories right here in this for me. This one has flown. And so that's what I brought for show and tell. If I was in a group, then you would all give me your feedback and I would just have to sit here quietly. So that's what we're going to do. It'll be about 15 minutes. So make sure you stick to the time so everybody gets a chance to share and to hear the feedback. And then I'll tell you why we do that kind of an activity. So, ready to go? Great way to kind of open the lines of conversation. It's a great way to start to get to know people, and it is pretty revealing based on what you bring and what that means to you. When I shared the story of how when I was a kid we went to Black Rock Desert together. But really, the rocket was really a story about my identity in a lot of ways. And on the surface level, it's not even really about the vacation that we took together. When my dad started this company, I was in middle school and I was so embarrassed about it. I was embarrassed to tell people that we went to the desert to fly rockets over the summer. I loved it when we were there. I enjoyed it when we were geeking out with others who were geeking out about the same thing. But what I love about the wooden rocket is the marriage of technology and nature, and that kind of, it's unexpected. Usually when people see it, the first thing they think is, well, that's strange. Wouldn't it catch on fire? Or does that really fly? Or isn't it too heavy? And it really is a picture of my family in a lot of ways, that entrepreneurial spirit like Jim told you about. And it also speaks to some wounds that I had. Obviously, if I was embarrassed to share it with anyone, I was embarrassed for people to know that that was happening. There was a wound there. So it was fun to hear you all as I walked around. There were tears, there was laughter, you weren't the only group, I'm just saying. And it's fun to kind of be on that level playing field where the expectation is that you can be vulnerable. And so we do this every year with students. But I'm going to start out actually talking some education jargon and buzzwords. So in education, I apologize, I should have used different colors, so I'm going to read to you. We use buzzwords like rigor, like flipped classroom, 21st century skills. Anybody heard that one lately? Digital natives, college and career ready. You guys get that one more than I do. Personalized assessment, STEM, STEAM, the sexier version of STEM. Data-driven, digital literacy, future-proofing, best practices, individualized, and core competency. There's, of course, thousands more because we are educators. We think of new ones every year. But in all of these words, and as you look at this list, how much of it is really about students? And let me change that question just a little bit, because maybe when you look at it, you're like, well, it's all about students, that's why we're here. How much of it is about students with names? The students in your classrooms that have stories just like the ones you just shared. How many of those words speak to that? I didn't really think too much about these words and these concepts when I was in the classroom. I started as a teacher in a second grade classroom in Jeffco, and then I was a technology integration specialist and taught technology for 7 years. And in the day-to-day of my classroom, I didn't really think too much about those. It wasn't really my focus. I started in 2003, and one of the nice things about being a technology integration specialist in 2003 is there wasn't curriculum yet. So I really had carte blanche. And in my background, I wasn't really a technology geek, despite what I just told you about the rocket. I didn't know that I was a tech geek until I got that job. And the way I got that job was really by accident. I was trying to leave education. And I was a newlywed, so it wasn't really an option. My husband said, no, you need a job. We need the income. It's not really, we've got student loans now that we got to pay off. And so I put my resume out really late in the year so that I could appease my husband and say, no, I tried everything I could. There's just nothing out there. So in July, I sent my resume out. And I got a call back from a school, and I went in to interview for actually a 5th grade position. And so I went in and I sat down in the interview and they said, we still would like to interview you, but we just filled this last spot. And I thought, well, last one, I did everything I could. I can, my conscience is clear, but I can tell my husband I tried. So I did that interview, they put me on the sub list, but on the way home, I got a call from that school, and they said, I know this is a long shot, but we are desperate for a computer teacher, and we noticed that you listed a website that you've used with kids before on your resume. I was like, well, I have used Starfall once upon a time with students. And so they said, and I know this is a long shot, but it's only 16 hours a week, and it's only kindergarten through 2nd grade. And I thought I had hit the jackpot because that sounded perfect. I could appease my husband, bring in a little money, and find my next career. And so I figured I could stay ahead of 2nd graders, little did I know. But I had a great all-mat classroom, and as it turns out, I am a huge technology geek. I didn't really know this until I was in the classroom. So the next year I took over all of the elementary school computer, and then I taught computers, but I taught it differently because my background wasn't technology. So my goal wasn't really to teach computers. My goal was really just to teach, and we used computers because I still wanted to teach reading and writing and science and social studies. One year, I was teaching 5th graders how to do just basic HTML code, and we were building websites. And in that process, I was showing them how to embed a Google Map into their website. And I said, so, if we wanted to put a map of the capital of the United States on our website, What would we need to, type in to look at? This was not supposed to be a trick question. As it turned out, it was a trick question. And out of 75 fifth graders, not one of them knew the capital of their own country. And I had a moment of sheer panic, thinking, our curriculum is missing something really big, and that's a problem. Our kids should know the capital of their own country. So I'm prompting them, no, you guys know this, come on, and crickets. So then they started throwing me a bone and just guessing, New York, San Francisco. And so there were lots of guesses, but none of them right. And so this was in May. So I went to the principal of the school at the time and I said, I think there might be a problem with the curriculum. Would it be okay if I took it home over the summer and just looked at what was missing and supplemented it with technology? And she looked at me and said, I think you're crazy, but you can do whatever you want over your summer. So I took home all of the kindergarten through fifth grade reading, writing, math, science, and social studies curriculum. I filled the back of my SUV. And my goal was just to supplement what was missing in the curriculum with some tech so that it wouldn't be missing anymore. Well, as it turns out, it wasn't actually missing in the curriculum. It was there. The kids had even filled out worksheets, taken tests, and they still couldn't apply that learning. And so by this time I had taught for 6 years. And so I actually loved, because I got to see the kids grow up. So I had them from kindergarten all the way through fifth grade. And so I went through, and as I'm flipping through, I have students in mind. And things that happened in the staff lounge started to make some more sense. So I would hear things about kiddos that, obviously I taught. And it was this struggle. I can't get them to do anything, or they're struggling so much and I've tried everything and I don't know what to do. And I was always pretty baffled because in my class they were like the stars, right? They were helping everyone, they were super into it, they were always right on top of it, they were never a behavior problem. And so then I would go and I would say, wait, are we talking about the same Benton? I know there's only one in the school, but this has to be a different kid. Well, as I'm flipping through the curriculum, I'm thinking of these kiddos, and I'm realizing, okay, I get why this isn't working, because it's one size fits all, and as it turns out, it doesn't fit very many of them. The year after making this discovery, I actually had to take a year off of teaching because I have autoimmune disorders, and I was getting to the point where it was really difficult for me to walk. And my rheumatologist said, you exist in a petri dish, and it would probably be a good idea if you gave your body a break. It was really hard for me to leave the classroom because I had learned to love what I do pretty quickly early on. And I loved the opportunity to be with kids and to be with them in a different way than their classroom teachers could be with them. And I loved working with the staff and being able to really help them feel good about using technology in the classroom. So it was reluctantly that I left, but I stayed in contact with that school as a consultant, and I started consulting with lots of different schools. And I started creating supplement guides for just teachers to better utilize technology in their classrooms and help them out with that. And so as I'm going to these different schools, I'm realizing actually it doesn't matter who the publisher on the front is. It really is all the same. When you strip away the different characters that get used, particularly in the elementary school, the characters are the differentiation. There's not a lot that's different about them. They're very much one size fits all. And that kind of broke my heart because here I know these kids. I know that they're brilliant and they're unique and they're creative and they have so much amazingness in them. And here in our education system, we're sending them all through the exact same content at the exact same time, and our goal is the same for all of them. Our goal, for us, it was that they would go to middle school, and then the next step would be that they get into high school, and then that they're college and career ready. And so as I was looking at this curriculum, I was really bothered that it was so standard, that it was so one size fits all for everyone. And so one day, as I was creating one of these tech guides, I was listening to Pandora. And this was still early on when Pandora was still felt magical and nothing like it existed. And I was listening to a station, I don't remember which one, but a song came on by an artist I had never heard before. And I had this true, like, I remember sitting back and having this just geek moment that technology had gotten to the point where it could predict something that felt as personal as a song and get it right. And I thought, it really did feel like magic. I didn't know how it worked, so I just was amazed. And I thought, well, why can't curriculum be like this? Like, this is how curriculum should be. You should be able to put in one thing that a student enjoyed and then have it create a playlist of curriculum that fits the kid, rather than send everybody through the same thing. So I couldn't get this idea out of my head. At the time I was working with an app developer out of Australia who was making really interesting apps, more than the kind of drill and skill apps that are normal to education. He was using augmented reality to encourage kids' creativity outside of the technology and then marry it with what was happening on the screen. So I contacted him and I said, hey, I have this crazy idea and I don't even know if it's possible, but can you just tell me if it's possible? And so I told him, and he said, well, if you can think it up, like, anything's possible. So you should definitely look at the back end of Pandora and how that works. So Pandora is actually called the Music Genome Project. It's based on the Human Genome Project. And the Human Genome Project maps DNA. So it's looking at genes, it's looking at how we're made up, with the idea that if we know more about how we're made up, that we can cure disease and do all sorts of great things. The Music Genome Project looks at music and it lists the attributes of music. And so there are about 400 attributes of music, and each piece of music gets listened to by a music expert who then tags the music with those attributes. And I thought, well, learning's got attributes. Like, we could tag learning with this kind of thing. So I couldn't get the idea out of my head, and I went back to Ian and I said, so I figured out how it works, and here's the basis, here's the rundown. How hard is it to code something like that? He said, if you can figure out the algorithm, and it's not that hard. So I said, okay, what do I do next? And he said, here's a prototyping software. See if you can figure it out. I had all kinds of time on my hands because I wasn't teaching. So I figured out how to use this prototype software, and I prototyped and created the algorithms for what I call the Learning Genome Project. The idea being that resources could be tagged, and it could be any resource, not just a set curricula. It could be a field trip, it could be an activity, it could be a book, a video, and it doesn't have to be lived on a machine. So I created this, and then I was very excited to get it built. So I started going to investors and talking with schools and districts. And in that process, I kind of hit a wall. And the wall I hit wasn't a technical one. It was the realization that our system isn't ready to individualize and personalize to that level. We don't have a model that is currently set up to do that. And so I went and started creating just, okay, what would that model look like? It started in the form of a blog rather. So I just started blogging ideas, This model school would have to have space that looked different, that worked differently. It would have to have this and this and this. So I started writing that, and it led to the start of my school, which is Anastasis Academy. Anastasis is Greek for stand again, and the idea being that we help kids stand again in who they are. One of the things that broke my heart, I always gravitate towards the the lower end students. I don't know why. I have a heart for them. But I also have a heart for the kids who were like me, who school may have come easy, who got the straight A's and kind of floated through, but often felt like a fraud because, I could get the A. I learned how to play the game of school, but I didn't necessarily understand what was happening in school. I knew how to get the A's, but I made it through, I was telling Sally, I made it through trig and calculus and higher math, and I got A's all the way through, and I can't tell you what any of it is used for. I have no idea. And so that idea of feeling kind of fraudulent, like somebody might find me out, and I've seen that with a lot of kids who are those straight A students. So I have a heart for those kids because they exist in a place that wasn't created for them. They exist in a place that was created for the masses. And as it turns out, we don't really teach the masses. We teach students with names, students with identities, students who are individual. So when Jim asked me to talk and come and talk to you, I thought, well, what do I have to say to high school teachers? Because that's not my realm. But I really think that at the core of everything we do as educators, this is the key to what we have to remember. When you look at that list of education jargon, what you'll see is it's not really about the students with a name. It's about students, and talking as if they're a homogeneous group. And the reality is they're just not. They're individuals. In the whole of history, there's never been another one of them. Even siblings with the same genes. I was listening to a group over here talking about siblings in the same family and how different they are. And I don't care what family you choose and how great and tight that family is, there are not two of them that see the world the same way, that have the same gifts, that experience life in the same way. And if you've watched the news lately, you know that we live in a world that is in desperate need of that individual gift and viewpoint and vantage point. And so when we talk about education, and when I talk about education within Anastasis, it always starts with students with names. And that sounds really obvious, but it really does change the way that we think about everything else that we do. So I often say the who is greater than the what. So risk-taking is great, but if we don't start with identity and knowing who a child is, that risk-taking is impossible. When we start with the who, we start making decisions about education differently. We have a different vantage point. We start every year, let me make sure right on. We start every year at Anastasis with what we call Detox Week. This is a fitting title because our initials are AA, so it works. But Detox Week starts out with 2 days where they're non-contact days. They're not everybody comes to school. All of our students sign up for an hour-long one-on-one with their teacher. And we go through a litany of questions to get to know them better. And so we ask things like, what are you afraid of? Who do you most admire? If you could change one thing about yourself, what would that thing be? What's your favorite book? Where do you like to vacation? What do you hope to be when you grow up? So we ask lots and lots of questions like that, find out what interests and passions they have. And then we've created a card game that we go through with kids. And we look at their learning style preferences, their multiple intelligence strengths, their brain dominance, and their personality profile. And this is all collected and put into a learner profile so that day one, walking into the classroom, we already have a pretty good handle on who these kids are and what they love. A lot of people have asked me, why don't we appify those cards? And there's something so important about that interaction between teacher and student during that time that to make it an app or a survey that they do on their own would lose something. Because just as you saw in the activity you all did this morning, one story leads to another, and pretty soon those bunny trails give you a more complete picture of who that child is. And so that starts our Detox Week. Detox Week also includes activities like the one you just did. And our goal in Detox Week is, one, to help kids start to identify who they are. A lot of times we don't realize that the system that we've put in place, intentionally or not, gives kids labels and sorts them. For me, I was known as the smart kid, the quiet kid, the easy to have in class kid. I was known as a lot of things, but none of them really mattered to my core of who I was. None of them were really necessarily my values. And I didn't feel like the smart kid, which led to that fraudulent piece, right? Feeling like a fraud. Our kids get labels, sometimes we give them to them. You're dyslexic. Sometimes they're communicated through the papers that we hand back, and they start to identify themselves as, I'm the F in math. I'm not good at math, I'm not good at science. Sometimes it's, I'm the straight A student and I have nothing else to learn, thank you very much. Apathy comes in a lot of forms, and we see a lot of apathy when kids come into our schools. Whether it's because they've gained labels from the one end or the other, there's a lot of that apathy that comes along with them. So during Detox Week, we do activities like this where we start to really talk about what does it mean to have an identity? What do you value? What do you care about? Not what you do, but what do you care about? At your core, who are you? What do you love? What really bugs you? In that process, we do activities like this, not just for their own identity, but so that they can start connecting to others in their classroom and in their school. We do it whole school. But the reason that we do that is, one, it's great for building community, but two, it starts to help them realize that I have an identity that's different than yours, that's different than yours, that's different than everybody's. And we don't have to all look the same, and that's okay. We don't all have to love the same things, and that's okay. Because there's some way I can connect to that object you brought, even though I may not be a CSU fan, right? It starts to open up and allow for vulnerability. We talk about 21st century skills that we want kids to have, risk-taking and, compassion, and we want them to be confident and all of these things. But we've set up a system where it's not comfortable to take risks. Because at the end of the day, I'm defined by a score and a grade. It's not safe to take a risk. When I'm in competition with those around me, I can't be vulnerable because I'm in competition, right? And so we help kids start to hear that narrative and start to understand that narrative and go through that process of really transforming the way they think about themselves and the way they think about others. We get a lot, less now, but when we started doing Detox Week, we would get a lot of pushback from parents. Why aren't you just jumping right into the curriculum? Well, number one, we don't use curriculum, so that's out. But number two, if we don't have this groundwork laid at the beginning of the year, nothing else that we do all year works. We have to start with the identity. Also in Detox Week, we do a lot of just games. We give kids opportunities to fail fabulously and hugely. We give them things that we know they're going to fail at, and it's going to be big. And we show them that actually, the first time there's tears, right? My team didn't win, and there's tears, sobbing. It's like the end of the world because they've never experienced that failure before. And it hasn't been safe in the past. And then we come together as a group and we talk about what that feels like. And nothing changed in our world. Everything is still fine. The sun will still rise. Everyone around us still loves us. We still have friends. And we really, it becomes almost therapy. But at the end of that, kids start to realize it actually is okay. They start to believe us. It is okay. Because now we get to do that challenge again, and I know something I didn't know before, and I can run at it again and do it better. And we start to iterate that way so that they can see there's opportunities here that we can redo this. Now we just have, kids coming in fourth grade. They've got, 4 or 5 years of baggage that they've carried or labels that they've brought on. You all are teaching kids that have been through this for quite some time. It may take a little longer than a week for them to believe that that is okay. At the end of Detox Week, we do what we call Identity Day. And Identity Day is a day where we have the kids bring something, or make something, or do something that they can share with others. And we invite the entire community, so families, grandparents, dogs come. Everybody comes to Identity Day. And we set it up almost like a science fair. And the kids, the only rule is you can't share something that I would know just by looking at you. So if you wear a hockey jersey every day, you can't tell me, you can't bring your hockey jersey and say, I'm a hockey fan, because we know that. We know that about you. So we ask them to bring something that's meaningful to them, that says something about them that people wouldn't necessarily know. And by the end of Detox Week, you would be surprised the things kids are willing and ready to share. We've had kids share their adoption story when they've never shared their adoption story before because they were ashamed of it. They were ashamed that mom and dad wasn't like everybody else's mom and dad. They shared stories of their bio parents' drug addiction and how that's shaped them. We've had kids share their diabetes so that others know why they prick their finger every day at lunch and throughout the day and why they wear this thing. We've had kids, an 8th grader came fully dressed in Doctor Who attire and brought his entire Lego collection and set it up. And he said at the end of it, I would have never done this. I would have never shared this part of me. Similar to my story, I would have never shared that part of me. It wasn't safe. It made me different. We celebrate differences, and we talk about that celebration of differences, but what's so cool about that day is as the entire community is going around, they're making the connections like you all just made. And they're realizing that I have a lot in common with all of these peers. And the things I love, they can appreciate that I love them, even if it's not their favorite thing. So Detox Week, I would say, is the most important week of our school year. It sets the stage for everything else that we do. So when we make decisions about things that we value, when we make decisions, it all starts with that Detox Week. This is another activity we do during Detox Week. I probably won't have you do this one just because we don't have, in the time frame, we don't have enough time. But this is an activity we have students do. We say, if you were going to, who would you like to pick 3 people that you would like to have to dinner? And because we have little kids and they're so literal, they're like, I wouldn't want to eat dinner with anyone. I just want to eat dinner with my mom and dad. So then we have to say, okay, if you could just spend time or meet anyone, who are your 3 people? And the rule is they can be anyone. It can be somebody from history, it can be somebody they know, it can be somebody they wish they knew, it can be somebody that is a character, right? Sometimes that tells us a lot. We had one little girl who said, I want to meet Junie B. Jones. So this is my list. My Grammy, it's my dad's mom. Da Vinci, sorry you can't see these, Jonathan is my husband. And my reasoning for those, for my grandmother, is she saw the humanity in everyone. She had this amazing way of cutting right through whatever narrative was happening anywhere, and she just saw the humanity. She was the most authentic person I had ever met. She was willing to just tell you like it is all the time, and often would call out my dad, which I thought was the greatest thing ever. And she was a connector, a relationship connector. My family would have never, we don't gather now that she's passed, but she was the glue that kind of held everyone together and brought these disparate pieces that didn't really match all in one room and made it work. Da Vinci, that dude could innovate. So for his innovation, for the connection and the synergy he saw between disciplines was just incredible. I wish I thought more like that. And his take on humanity. And for him, we saw a Da Vinci exhibit with our kids a few years ago down at 16th Street Mall. And as we were walking through, a lot of his inventions actually never worked. And it's not because they couldn't work, but it's because he was hired to build war machines, and he didn't want them to work. And so he left pieces out, like the critical piece that would make it operate properly. And then he'd give them instructions, but they would be written upside down and in code and flipped, right? So he's like, no, it's all here. You can figure this out. And they never worked because he was concerned about the humanity, And then my husband, because he is the bravest person I know. Talk about a risk taker. He just I don't know, he has no fear. It's great. He is incredibly creative and thinks creatively in every single situation, and I admire that. And then he is really funny. He can make me laugh. So when we look at those lists, and as your kids make these kind of lists, what you'll start to see is that it's what they value. And so that's another one we do during Detox Week. We talk a lot at Anastasis about choosing the moon. Obviously, I like space, I like rockets. Every July 20th, I kind of nerd out and I go to wechoosethemoon.org, and it's the complete live interaction between Mission Control and Apollo. And so you can hear exactly what was going on. It's just the coolest. So I just leave it running in the background every time. So when we talk in terms of education at Anastasis, we talk about choosing the moon. And when you consider what we had going in 1969, we didn't really have appropriate technology to put a person on the moon. The computers were heavy. They held 2,000 words, 4 kilobytes. They were incredibly expensive, $150,000. And it got a human to the moon. And a lot of times when we're talking about education, we're talking about what we do here and how to make the shifts necessary that we need to make in education. It can feel like trying to send a man to the moon in 1969. It can feel like trying to use that antiquated technology to do something as enormous as send a human to the moon. And so when we talk about what we do at Anastasis and what we're looking at in education, we're really choosing the moon. I love that Kennedy moment where he says, we choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's hard. I love that we can choose to do the hard thing, even though it's the hard thing. And I love, as I walked through Castle View yesterday, I love seeing all of the places that you are choosing to do the hard thing and not just do what everybody else is doing. So we choose the moon for professional development. What you realize when you start with identity is everything else starts to not work well. You start taking everything and saying, this doesn't really fit anymore. This doesn't feel like it jives. And so when we do things like professional development at Anastasis, I don't do a lot of this actually. We are a one-to-one technology school. I have never asked my staff if they use technology. I have never done a tech training. It's just part of what we do, and people figure it out, and it's great. Instead, our professional development, because we value identity, looks more like this. I don't know if you can see that picture with the light. It's a picture of us all paddleboarding. And I took my staff paddleboarding at the beginning of the year because I had learned that none of us had ever been paddleboarding. I learned this over happy hour one night. We were talking and I said, I really want to go paddleboarding. And they're like, yeah, that looks interesting. I've never done it before. And some of them said, I would never do that. So I was like, great, we're going to go paddleboarding. So we went paddleboarding, Evergreen Lake. One morning we rode up all together and got out, and beautiful day, and went paddleboarding. And we did this for a couple hours, and I really didn't have an agenda. There was no okay, before we get out there, here's the things that you need to think about, and here's what we're going to do. We just went. And it was fascinating to see, some of us fearless pop right up on the board and sooner gladiator style with each other, trying to knock each other off. Inevitably somebody falls in and they think it's hilarious and great. Some of us just want to float, just want to be out and float and just enjoy that nothing else is happening right now. And then you have some that were terrified to even attempt to stand up. And so stayed down the entire time, didn't go around a whole lot and just kind of watched what everybody else was doing. After this experience, we went to Bud's in Sedonia, if you know Bud's Burgers and Chips. And we just talked about what it felt like to be that learner for the first time. We put ourselves in the role of a student and remembered why sometimes there's some fear associated with something new like that. Why sometimes there's no problem popping up. And to the one that wouldn't get up, wouldn't take the risk, we said, tell us what that felt like. What could we have done anything to support you or encourage you so that that wasn't so scary? And we put ourselves in the place of our students and talked about that human element. Because it's great to talk about content, it's great to talk about, technology or 21st century skills, but if we can't put ourselves in the place of that student in our classroom with a name, with an identity, the content comes secondary. It's really hard. So also for professional development, I'm going to play you a Saturday Night Live clip here. I'm not going to put this in context for you. We're just going to watch it, and then I'll let you see if you can guess what I use this for professional development. So I used this to start our conversation about assessment.
I knew that.
Because as I was watching, this often happens. It makes my husband crazy. We have notebooks all over the house because I'll see something like this and he'll see me jump up and I'm like running for a pen and writing down thoughts. But as soon as I saw this, I was like, this is what happens when we introduce competition in assessment. Suddenly that person who was just a little bit goes like off the deep end, right? When we put that carrot, when we dangle that carrot, suddenly it changes the behavior. It changes the goal of what's happening. Rather than just getting feedback, now there's $50 hanging out there. Now there's the A hanging out there. And it changes. And is that what we want assessment to be? Or does it have maybe a different purpose? And so this started our conversation about assessment. Things like this I also use because, and the paddleboarding, it builds awesome camaraderie among my staff. This happened the first year, we watched this clip the first year, and we still refer to it. We are constantly saying, like, write that down. Like, constantly, it's part of our vernacular now. Or, she doesn't get it, or she's got to go. So we use a lot of that just among us, because now we have this shared commonality among us that we've laughed together and enjoyed this together. The activity like you did this morning does the same thing. Now you could go out to happy hour with any of these people and you have built-in conversation. You've like leapfrogged over the awkward small talk, which is great. I often will, our staff obviously is small, but we have a lot of different interests and backgrounds, and on the surface, if you just looked at us side by side, you'd be like, they don't have a whole lot in common. I'm not sure how they enjoy spending time together. But we really do enjoy each other, and the differences that we have make all of us better because they see the world differently than I do. So when we talk about assessment, this is our report card. We started with that video, and then we started talking about what is it that we value. Apart from anything that we have to report or care about or the system tells us we have to care about, let's put all that aside. Let's put those assumptions aside for now. And let's just talk about what we want our assessment to look like. What do we value? And the way that we started that conversation was by talking about our youngest in the school. She started as the baby of the school, Cameron, sweetest little thing. She's now in 5th grade, still the sweetest little thing. But we always use her as our example because she was the youngest. And we said, when Cameron leaves Anastasis, what do we want her to look like? When she leaves here, what do we want her to look like? And what we did is we had whiteboards all over the room, and we just wrote down words. We shouted out and just wrote down words. What do we value? And what we value, as it turns out, is things like risk-taking, things like somebody who's compassionate, somebody who's service-minded. Not once did we say, we want them to know all their math facts by the time they leave here. Even though we have people passionate about math on our staff, that wasn't something that came up. What did come up is, it'd be really great if they thought like a mathematician, if they thought like a scientist, like a historian, like a geographer, if they were a writer, if they approached learning with that growth mindset, that'd be awesome. So we wrote all these words down if they were curious, right? We wrote all these words down, and because there were hundreds of them, we said that would be cumbersome. And we started crossing out, or this is kind of like this, or let's mesh these two things and make it something different. And we came up with, you can't see it well in this light, but the words that are around our wheel there. And that's really what we value. That's what we want for kids. And then we said, okay, well, it's kind of hard to give an A to compassion. How do you measure that? And so what we did is we said, well, we believe that learning is a journey and that it's continual. And if we give them an end like an A, that it subconsciously tells us that the learning's ending. And we don't want to tell them that even through the way that we do things. We want them to know that learning continues. And so because we start with students with names, with their identity, we said, okay, how do we show them where they are in their learning journey? How do we help them kind of have these markers so that they understand where they're at in that journey? And so we have along the side, and the purple there is that journey of learning. And novice is where we always start. We all start as novice. It's not a bad thing. It's the beginning of learning. So we enter as a novice, and that's where we need a lot of support because we've never seen it before. From there, we go into an apprentice. And when we're an apprentice, we're under a master, somebody who knows more than we do. Somebody who is guiding us and showing us what we need to know. And then we go to practitioner. At the practitioner level, you've pretty well got it. You're actually practicing it. But there are still some things that you need some help with, right? There's still some things that maybe you don't know all the way. You need support, prompting, guidance, whatever it is. You can't do it independently quite yet. Then we have the scholar level. At the scholar level, that means I got this. I can do this alone. I don't even need prompting, right? I don't need prompting. I don't need support. I don't need help. And then we have a level 5. For most, that would be like mastery, right? But we have a level 5, and we call that change maker. And at the change maker level, not only do I understand it, but I can actually make connections to other learning. This happened in a 2nd, 3rd grade class this year. Obviously, you know, they're still working on basic addition, subtraction, that kind of thing. But what was nice is as they're doing this, they were also out in our garden one day for our inquiry block, and they were huge sunflowers out there. So they went to YouTube, and they were able to look up some videos about the Fibonacci pattern. And our kids were fascinated. It's the coolest thing we've ever seen. And then they noticed that some seashells and all these other things. Well, the Fibonacci pattern is just basic addition. It's not difficult. It's simple enough if you're interested for a young mind to understand, but if we look at where it falls in curriculum, it's usually not until your level, if it makes it there, right? But our kids are so fascinated that they learned this and can do it to the thousands and tell you all about how it works. And they recognize this pattern. That would be change maker, right? They're connecting disciplines. They're recognizing patterns. You'll see different colors around. The green is our ethos, and that is that habits of mind, the attitudes towards learning. The orange is more of our character development. The yellow is logos, that's more of the logical mind, so that's where the mathematician, scientist, researcher, logical, kind of words. Mythos is the more abstract mind, so that's where we have story, writing, reading. This is what we value, and so that's what we do. Now we hear a lot, well, what do you have, you still have to, they have to go back into a system, then what? We translate it back into a traditional transcript and send them on their way. When they head to high school, when they head to you guys, we translate it back. But within our building, we've made the decision that this is what we value, and we want to share what we value with our students who have identities, because they now value these same things. And as I said, it shows them that we don't have that end point in learning, that learning is a journey, that it's okay to fail. It's hard to fail when you have a system that tells you it's not okay to fail. So they get these disparate kind of messages from us. We choose the mood for individualization. As I said, we make learner profiles for kids. This is an example of 4 of the cards that they go through in those learner profiles. We choose the mood and indulge curiosity. We're inquiry-based school, and so we value the curiosity and the question and that desire to learn more and to understand the world around us. We take field trips about once a week. So our learning excursions are always tied to our inquiry block. And we take the kids out of the building because we want them to see that learning happens more than in the 4 walls of this school, that it happens more than just for me. There are more experts in this world that probably know more about any given thing than I do, and let me introduce you to them. We choose the moon for parent partnership. We do something called the Meeting of the Minds every 5 weeks, where we get together with parents and teachers and students, and we talk about where we're at in the learning journey and what our next hopes and goals are. For community and mentorship, we are really, we work hard to build our community. And I think when you walk in our school, and those of you who have done that probably noticed, our kids interact with each other regardless of what they look like, what team they're supporting, what age they are. Our oldest sit with our youngest at lunch and have really amazing conversations, believe it or not. And our kids mix up. It feels more like what you would see in a neighborhood or a family with cousins. And it really is a different feel. And it changes the way they interact within the building. We use space very differently. Our space is based on, rather than having a set classroom, our space is based on the posture of learning that happens in that classroom. So we have a silent like a ninja room, where kids can always count on it being totally silent in that room, that when they need a place to go, and now that they know themselves well enough to know, you know, when I'm doing math, I really do need like complete silence. Or when I'm writing, I can't be distracted, so I go use the silent like a ninja room. We have the campfire room, which is a place that we gather as a community every day. Research shows when you're in the circle, when you're lower to the ground, you're willing to be more vulnerable with your thoughts. So we utilize that space that way. We have a coffee shop that has no coffee, unfortunately, but it is set up like a Starbucks. The idea being there that they use it like you would go and work in a Starbucks. So sometimes it's solo with your headphones on, and sometimes you're meeting with a group and talking about something, working something out. We have a prototype lab, and that's where we store just junk for kids to build and prototype and test ideas out. It's like a maker space. We have science equipment in there where they can test out science theories and ideas. And then we have 3 Genius Labs, and our Genius Labs are more all-purpose rooms. They're not set up really like classrooms. We have tables, we have bungee chairs, if you've ever seen those. We have tree houses and all kinds of flexible space. And all of the space looks different every day based on which kids are using it and how they move the furniture to do what they need it to do. We're big on building that community so that when they are working, you can have several classes working in the same space at the same time. And hunches and ideas start to collide in really amazing ways. Kids see somebody working on something else and they say, oh my gosh, 2 years ago, I was reading this about black holes, and have you seen this? As they're building a tesseract for A Wrinkle in Time, what they think it looks like. And another student is like, 2 years ago during the inquiry block, I was learning about black holes, and have you thought about maybe it's like a black hole? And then like minds explode and excitement happens and cool things happen. We've started a wall in one of our rooms that's just a plastic tablecloth like you've got back here, that's just tacked to the wall because we found that gel pens work really nicely on them. And the kids, every 5 weeks we have a new inquiry block, and they write the inquiry, the line of inquiry that they're following and what they're interested in on the wall with their names so that everybody else can see who's working on what. And as they find resources themselves, it's really cool that they start saying, hey, I read this great article on Elon Musk. Have you seen this one? I'll send it to you. These are 4th through 8th graders doing this. It's pretty incredible to see. I love that Castle View is choosing the moon. Through days like today, where you get to choose what your professional development looks like and the conversations that you get to have around assessment and around learning and individualization. I love the separate things that are happening in the humanities and in the math classes and in the academies. Really, really transformative things are happening here, and I love that you choose the moon. My challenge to you is that as you're choosing the moon, that you start the conversation always with names in mind and not just students, because we know they're not a homogeneous group. But so often our focus gets shifted because we've got it, what 21st century skills are we enacting, or what are we doing for personalization? And somehow we start to lose those individuals with names. And so my challenge is just that you would start there in all of your conversations today, that as you're moving through, you would start to think about that. Jim told me, when you come in, give us something that feels tangible, like we can do it. Because it's really nice for me to show you what we do at Anastasis and say, so there you go, and leave. But I want to leave you with something that you can take away, that you can do in your classroom on Tuesday if you wanted to. And I would say the first thing would be helping your kids break down some of those barriers through these kind of activities that you did today. Do a mini detox and have those conversations. I told this story to both the parents last night and to the Mosaic Collective group. Like I said, I was that A student, I was pretty easy. But I had my own labels. I believed for a lot of years that I was not enough. And I was challenged just this year to think about, where would that have started? Like, you seem to have it pretty together. Where would that have started? And so I thought about it. And as it turns out, I think it started in 1st grade. I was lucky enough, I had a Leave It to Beaver kind of family, really awesome family. So I was constantly told I was enough at home. But at school, in 1st grade, they did these things called VIP awards. Anybody remember these things? So VIP awards were for very important persons, and every month the teacher would select VIPs to stand up on stage in the all-school assembly. You get a certificate, and your parents would pop up in the back, and you get juice and cookies and get to shake the principal's hand, and it was a big deal. Right? Going into school, I had no idea that this thing existed, but once I did know it existed, I was like, I need this to happen in my life. So month 1, they stand up, they get on stage, everybody claps, it's exciting. They're called out as very important persons. Our VIPs of the month. So month 2, the assembly comes around, and I'm sitting in the audience like, is it going to be me today? And it wasn't me. I knew a group of kids, but not. Then about month 3, I started recognizing some tells. Right? The kids who got called up were usually dressed nicer. So I'm like, oh, maybe I need to step up my outfits here. And their parents were there. And so I told my mom, I need a side pony today, and I need to dress nice, and are you coming to school today? She said, well, why would I come to school? And I said, well, I might get a VIP award. And she said, well, I haven't heard about this. And so we went, and of course I didn't get it again, which is why my mom had no idea. And it went on like that. And I started to feel like maybe there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't getting the VIP award. But my card never strayed from green. It was always on green. And my teachers seemed to like me, and I was pretty good at reading, and I was nice, and I was quiet, and I didn't get called out a lot. And so I thought, well, there must be something. Maybe I need to smile more, maybe I need to be a better friend. And so I started to get that feeling of I'm not enough. And so, as it turns out that year, I was in the last group. I got the leftover award, which is how I thought of it even then. And here's this program that its intention was to build everybody's self-esteem. And in the process, it had done the exact opposite. It had taught me that I wasn't enough, that there was something wrong. Now as an adult, I can look back and I think how absurd, because they probably, you know, as a teacher, if I had to give an award to everyone, I would have gotten the hard ones out of the way first and saved the easy for last because I can count on them being easy. But as a first grader, you don't know that, and you carry that, right? So second grade, I've got to be perfect. I got placed in a high reading group because I could read all the words really well. I had pretty good fluency and cadence. We read Ralph S. Mouse, but I didn't know what was happening in the story. But I learned that if I listened to the other people talk and I went last, or if I volunteered to read, they wouldn't call on me to know what the story was about, and I could fool them. So I stayed in the high reading group. And that carried on those kind of things, which is what led me to feeling like a fraud in high school with a lot of what I was doing. And so I'm challenging you to look at some of those things that we have in place and really weigh it against the students with names and think about not just what the intended consequences are, but also these unintended consequences. I know my school was not trying to make me feel like a loser. That was not their intent, right? But sometimes those things, when we don't think them all the way through, that's the result. I promised Jim I'd give a few minutes for Q&A, so do that. Yeah.
How old is the school?
We are 5 years old this year. I started it 6 years ago, May. We have 68 students this year, preschool through 8th grade. Somebody last night asked how big would we get, and because of what we do and what I believe about community, we wouldn't get bigger than 150 students. That 150 seems to be like the magical range where you can still know everybody's name and recognize, you know, parents and all those things. So at that point, we start another campus. We're located in Centennial, catty corner to Newton Middle School. We lease space from Littleton Church of Christ. Yeah.
So as teachers who have, like I know that I have 150 students myself. So what would be like some advice that you could give us to kind of implement some of these things, but still, I mean, it's difficult, right? Like,
totally. Yeah, so when I was a specialist, I had 435 that I went through every week. And the only benefit for me, and I only had them 30 minutes, I mean, it was a short amount of time. The benefit I had is that I had them year after year, so it's kind of like looping, which I love that you've got a math program that does that. I think it's amazing. I don't know how to do that school-wide, but if you could, it would be amazing. I think really starting to help them realize their own identity and recognize that the others around them have an identity would be the biggest thing that you could do. Because if they can realize that it's okay that they're different and we can still be friends and we can still, you know, talk and we don't have to like shun each other, I think that's the biggest takeaway that I've seen with our kids is they really support each other in great ways, even though I think if you just threw them in a room, naturally they wouldn't necessarily be the best of friends, but they get pretty close. So I would say teaching them, kind of leading them through exercises and opportunities where they can see that we are just all human. And I think that would change that vulnerability piece and be a good first step into how to do that.
Yeah, you talked about the unknown consequences of giving awards. So do you guys give any kind of awards, or how do you encourage students?
We don't. We don't give awards. So what we do, we call out students for the amazing things they do all the time. And so we have a morning gathering every single day where the entire community is together. And anytime we know something that's happened either in school or outside of school, we call them out and say, that is so awesome that you placed second in dance this weekend. Like, congratulations, that's fantastic. It's more individualized even in that interaction than saying, you know, we're going to give an award for this and here's the criteria. So it's really honoring what they're already doing and who they are. About once a month, we do something as a whole school where we gather together and one of our junior high teachers, Lance, says, does anybody have anything that they want to say about another student? You know, has anybody encouraged anyone else or made you feel good that you want to like call them out and say thank you? And so the kids will nominate each other and the student will come up and everyone in the community raises their hand to say, Ricky is such a good friend, or Ricky is so persistent and I love that he does this, and he ate lunch with me yesterday and it made me feel really good. And we just take turns going through and nominating each other and kind of bragging on each other that way. And that's been pretty, it's fun to see. And because of the community we've got, it's fun to see the oldest kids nominate the youngest and say, you know, Johnny encourages me because he's always smiling and he's fun to be around and he's funny. So it kind of builds that culture of recognition rather than the one moment in time.
Do you ever notice that there are kids that doesn't happen for? And then what do you do about that?
We have not had kids that it doesn't happen for. We have incredibly compassionate, we have kids that that's their gifting, is noticing what others do, and so we haven't ever had, you know, there's always someone in the crowd that has that just heart for other people, lifting other people up and making them feel good. So we haven't ever run into, you know, they're constantly kind of left in the shadows and not recognized. We have never had that happen.
Because in our classrooms, we have that happen.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think because you build that, they're learning that.
I think it starts at that detox week where they do start to see that, like I said, they get to know each other in these kind of contexts, so there's always something they can say about someone else. That a lot of times, you know, I'm not sure anyone in my high school would know if you said, oh, you went to Chatfield, did you know Kelly Simon? And they would give you a blank stare. Like, I don't think any of them would know me. But I think that's when you build this kind of activity and that kind of culture in, it changes the way that you're able to interact and talk, because even those who are shy and painfully so, or, you know, for whatever reason, now there's a connection.
Yeah, I'm curious, what brings kids to your school? Is it because they value what you have to offer? Are the kids that didn't fit into another model and they come to you to help that learning process?
Yeah.
And after they leave you, do they find those skills transfer into the high school?
Yeah, good question. So the first question was, how do kids find us? How do families find us? And it started out, when we started the school very early on, it was a lot of kids that I had taught in the past followed. And they didn't necessarily follow because they loved the philosophy or they understood the philosophy even. It was really, I don't like what's happening here, and so I'm just going to try something else. In our fourth year and this year, we're starting to see that people are looking for what we're doing. So they're seeking out that different pedagogy, that different approach to learning, and they're saying, we appreciate that, that it's not rote memorization. So they're starting to seek us out. And then as far as our alumni going into high school, our kids tend to go to either Valor or Arapahoe. They generally end up on the honor roll. They transfer the skills fine. I always tell parents, we're not going to pack kids with all of the content that high school might think they need. That's not what makes them successful in high school. What I think makes our students successful is, number one, they're confident because they know who they are. They're not afraid. Our kids public speak from the time they're this big. They're not afraid because they know who they are. They've got a good voice. The second thing is they know how to self-advocate. They're really good. We push that from the time they're young. If you need something, come and talk to somebody. You need to self-advocate. You're going to be late, don't make mom call us. Let us know. If you know, let us know, and self-advocate. So we start that when they're really young too. And then the third thing is that we really help kids know what to do when they don't know. So when they hit that roadblock, rather than just saying, well, I'm just not good at math, or I'm just not good at science, or I'm just not good at fill in blank, it's, I can keep pushing. I know what to do when I don't know. I know what resources or what to reach out to or who to go to. And so that's what I think, that's what makes our kids successful. It's not because we gave them everything they need to know to be ready for biology. It really is, we've taught them how to learn. And we call it an apprenticeship in learning. Our kids generally come back and say the thing that is most frustrating about high school is no one will let us have a conversation. They miss the deep connection to the learning. You know, it's, we read the book and then we take the test, particularly at Ballard. It's an Ivy prep school, and so there's a lot more of that rote memorization is valued, and they can do it, they just don't enjoy it. They miss being able, they come and spend their fall break with us, just come and hang out. After school, almost every day we have alumni just spending time, and they say things like, it feels like I can breathe here. So we know we've done something right. Yeah.
So I'm not sure, do you have typical parent-teacher conferences, so to speak? It sounds like the culture might not lend itself to that, but if I were to observe a parent-teacher conversation around student progress, what would that look like?
Yeah, so they're actually happening today, so we call them Meeting of the Minds. And they happen after school for 2 days, and then we do on Friday of the Meeting of the Minds, we always do a half day for kids so that the whole afternoon teachers and parents and students can come back and meet. And in some ways they look like a typical conference, but what we're really looking at there is showing, here's the skills that your student is working on, here's the inquiry block, here's the projects that they're working on, and here's what I'm noticing in that learning journey. You know, in learning their multiplication facts, they're just at maybe the apprentice level, and they need some more practice, and so here's what we're doing at school, and here's what you can do at home to support that. And here's the game that they made for themselves that they want to play at home to help them remember that. So it looks a little bit more collaborative than the ones I was maybe a part of in the traditional school, but it really is collaborative. It's the child getting to show off what they've done the last 5 weeks, and then the teacher showing here's where they're at in that learning process. In the afternoons, we individualize. We don't have any boxed curriculum in the building, like 0. So our teachers are actually instructional designers, and they do that every day for all of the students. Our class sizes are small because we individualize to that level, so we cap our classes at 12, and we have mixed developmental levels. I'll take one more.
Okay, do you have another question?
There's one more right
One
here.
more? Last
I
question.
was just going to ask you about motivation. Without these kind of extrinsic motivators, what do you do to motivate your students, and how are students motivated?
You find that you stop having to motivate with anything external when they're doing something that they really enjoy and love to do. So through the inquiry blocks, they're able to actually find, we introduce them, and sometimes you don't know what you love until you're introduced to it, and you're like, actually, we had that conversation here, that sometimes you don't know you love jewelry making until you have to take a jewelry making class, and you're like, actually, this is awesome. So that's where the field trips and those type of things come in, because it gives kids that kind of spark of, oh my gosh, when we were there, I saw this, and that was really interesting to me, and I want to explore that more. We do a lot of whole class brainstorming at the beginning of a block. So it'll go through, and they'll kind of all throw out things that the inquiry question makes them think about. And then, so there's always a way they connect in, and they get ownership over the project, the outcome of what that looks like and how it's going to work. And I think that is what motivates them more than anything. We have kids say, is it okay if I research this at home? Because we don't have homework, and we're like, yeah, absolutely, go for it. So I think when you change just the way things are working, you don't have to have those external motivators. It's not to say we never have kids not do their work. They're kids, that happens. Particularly when they get into the junior high, maybe they didn't do their reading the night before. We talk a lot with kids about properly managing freedom, and if you don't properly manage the freedom, you lose some of that freedom. So if you can't manage the freedom of planning your evening so that you can read a chapter, then we'll plan that for you during the day. And so they lose some of that freedom. So that helps too, just those kind of natural consequences. Thanks.
Help me think. Kelly, please.
No, I'm not doing it again.